Hey everyone, how's it going? Forrest here, again with another installment of my complete analysis of all of J.S. Bach's chorale harmonizations. Today, again, we're looking at Jesu meine Freude, which translates to Jesus, my joy. We're in the realm now where we're looking at a motet that was composed by Bach that's based on this text, so the next couple of episodes, including yesterday's episode, is going to be based on this text. Not the same verse necessarily, but different lines from the text. Something also visually different if you haven't caught it. There are 5 staves in each system. That is not a typo, that's not a mistake. There are 2 soprano parts for this particular setting. Very interesting. It threw me for a loop visually, but more or less the harmonization is similar. Well, it's closer to identical than it isn't to yesterday's chorale, and I feel like that might be the theme for the next couple of episodes. But regardless, we're going to analyze it anyways. It is its own unique chorale. Let's hop into the analysis. So 1 sharp in the key signature. We start on E minor. We end on E major. I reckon we are in the key of E minor. We have a passing tone in the tenor here. Before we have E, G, B, G, and B, which is another E minor chord. No need to reanalyze. This E is a chord tone. We then have E, A, C, F sharp, and A. This E is an accented non-chord tone. I think this D sharp is the interesting tone here. It's D sharp, F sharp, C, F sharp, and A, which is D sharp fully diminished 7th. That's 7/7 in the key of E minor. And then we get E, G, B, G, E, G, B, E, and G, which is E minor in root position. And that chord gets changed slightly on this beat here. We get a skip here in the bass, C, E, 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 and G, and I'll go ahead and mark that as a passing 6 chord. And when I say passing, I don't mean literally every voice is consisting of a passing tone, but rather the fact that the chord passes over the span of a subdivision. I think we talked about this last time, that maybe a more accurate label for a chord like this would be a subdivided chord, because it's a byproduct of subdividing the harmonic rhythm. We then have A, C, E, and F sharp. That's F sharp minor 7 flat 5 over A. Bach loves 2-6-5 chords. Passing tone in the tenor before we get B, F sharp, B, D sharp, and F sharp, which is our 5 chord B major. This A is a 7th, but a non-chord tone in this context. And then we have E minor, E, G, B, E, and E, which is our tonic triad in root position. Perfect authentic cadence. Okay, looking ahead, we have a similar phrase to yesterday's where we get this modulation to D. At least that's how I'm analyzing it. You could analyze it as some type of E Dorian if that's how you hear it. But to me, this is pretty much D major. There really isn't much arguing there. But we do end up going back to E minor at some point to end the phrase with a half cadence on that B major chord. So starting off the phrase, I mean, you could analyze as early as this E minor chord, but I'm going to say that this G major chord is where we analyze G, 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 D, and B, which is our 3 chord in the key of E minor. In the key of D major, it is our 4 chord, our subdominant. Passing 7th in the alto. It's so weird seeing the alto in the middle of the staff, but that's where it is. We then have G, A, E, A, and C sharp. This is a 5 chord of some sort. Now, if you look at this G as a pedal and don't want to analyze it as a 7th, that's fine. I am going to analyze it as a 7th. This is 5/4-2 because the 7th does resolve down by step. It does kind of feel like a lower suspension, though, functioning some way, maybe like a lower, like a would that be like a 5? Wait, G up to A. That'd be like a no. What am I doing? G up to A, a 2/3 suspension. Going here in the bass, G, A, D, A, and D. This G, like I said, accented non-chord tone or a 2/3 suspension under the tenor. F sharp, A, D, A, and D, which is our tonic triad D major in first inversion. We get another G major chord, G, G, D, G, or B and B, which is our 4 chord in the key of D major, but in the key of E minor, it is our 3 chord, and this is the same common chord that was our gateway back into E minor in yesterday's chorale as well. We then have a similar figure to the first phrase where we get a skip in the bass, it's a non-chord tone, and a leap in the alto as well. I neglected to mention that this time, as well as the skip in the tenor, because those are both chord tones, so I didn't need to mark them. But here this G is a chord tone as well, so this feels less like a chord change, but to show the symmetry between the two phrases, E, G, G, B, and B, this is now our tonic triad in the key of E minor. 3 going to 1's an interesting progression. We do have this as more of a deliberate progression in yesterday's chorale. 3 going to 1, and 1 is what happened on this beat here, but here we get 1 referenced during the subdivision. I really don't have the same conventional relationship with, how many voices need to be intact in order to sort of motion towards the idea that we actually are referring to a chord here, but I don't know, the bass moving feels like it's more significant than any of the other voices moving to motion towards a chord being referenced here. So I'm going to call it our 1 chord, and we also get 3 to 1 in yesterday's chorale via my analysis. So yeah, that's what I'm going to stick with. We then have C, C, G, B, and E. That is C major 7, which is 6-7 in the key of E minor. Interesting progression here, 3-1-6. It's a thirds progression. They're all a third away from one another, the roots at least. And yeah, 3 very stable chords, so it's fascinating to see a chord progression like this. Granted, one of the chords is a passing chord, and really the trajectory here is 3 going to 6. This B is a chord tone because this is a 6-7 chord. This A is a non-chord tone. This G is a chord tone before we get C, C, F sharp, A, E, which is F sharp minor 7 flat 5 over C, which would be 2, 4, 3 to sum. But if you're thinking about what kind of cadence this is, I think this F sharp's an accented non-chord tone, and we're actually looking at A minor over C, 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 E, A, and E, which is 4, 6 going to 5. I think I talked about this in yesterday's video or in one of the more recent episodes that I've made, where I talk about half cadences, and when we see 2, 4, 3 chords, they're usually in a situation where you can also analyze as a 4, 6. And that's really the only context we see 2, 4, 3, and not the only. Sometimes we do see it throughout the chorale in the middle of the phrase, but when we see 2, 4, 3 in a cadential situation, it's usually some type of contrapuntal a different contrapuntal outlook on what the chord is. But I think this is a 4-6 chord that eventually goes to 5, making this a special kind of cadence called a Phrygian half cadence. If you're into that sort of thing, I don't think it's super important, but the half step going down does seem to be a convention of many of the half cadences that appear in the chorales. But looking ahead, we have a pretty standard phrase. We're still in the key of E minor, and we are not modulating anywhere. So we have E, B, G, E, and E. It's E minor in root position. Then we have an interesting chord here. We have 4 of the voices moving, which makes me feel like there is a chord going on here. And in fact, there is. We have F sharp, A, C, A, and E, which is F sharp minor 7 flat 5 over A. So we have a 2-6-5 chord going on here, and it is happening in between 2 tonic triads, G, G, B, E, and G. So typically we would see a 7 chord here. We would expect like a D sharp diminished chord, but here we have a 2 chord. That's really interesting. Typically we don't see 2 go to 1. When we do see 2 go to 1, it's not usually over 2 beats in the harmonic rhythm, but rather a situation like this where A, it's a subdivision, or B, the 2 chord shares a beat with another chord that's more likely to precede 1. So 2 is very seldom seen going directly to 1, and this is one of the cases, like I just said, it's not an exact 2 going to 1 on the harmonic rhythm, it's a passing chord, even more so in a genuine sense of the word passing chord than this 6 chord or this tonic triad was, for example. But we have 1, 2, 1, and then we have 3 voices moving again. This A is a non-chord tone, this E is a chord tone, so we don't need to mark it, and this C is a non-chord tone, leaving us with A, E, C, E, and G, which is like an A minor 7 chord root position. That's 4, 7. And in a cadential situation, 4/7 functions like a predominant a lot of the times. So we would expect some type of predominant chord in a cadential situation. So B, B, F sharp, E, and F sharp. This E is a 4/3 suspension over the lower voice is probably the bass, implying a 5 chord, and we get the resolution on the next beat. We also get a passing tone in the alto here, B, B, A, D sharp, and F sharp with an anticipation in the melody. This is actually B7, so we'll change the figure bass to imply that there's a 7 being introduced, and then we have E minor, E, B, G, E, and E, which is our tonic triad in root position. Alright, moving ahead to the second system, we have a phrase that ends with a perfect authentic cadence in the key of G major, so we're looking for a point on which we modulate. We have E, B, E, G, and B to start things off. That's our tonic triad. Again, because this is a new line, I will reiterate the Roman numeral just to re-articulate the fact that we're using the same Roman numeral after a line break. So our eyes move, new line, reiterate the analysis. That's just a stylistic thing that I do, but it's not something that you have to do. We also have an interesting chord going on here where this is actually really functioning like a pedal. We have E, F sharp, A, and B, which is kind of like a B. I guess there are a couple different ways you could analyze this chord. Either way, it's like some type of sus chord, not really analyzable by tertian standards, at least as far as Bach's harmonic vocabulary was concerned. But this E pedal is what makes the chord very interesting, because this E is clearly being syncopated in the tenor here, and it's this D sharp that's actually part of the chord, D sharp, A, and B. But the E, which we would expect, D sharp, F sharp, A, and B, yeah, we would expect some type of like, this is a 5/7 chord of some sort, but it is happening over an E pedal. And we would expect this E maybe to go down to D sharp, but the E goes back up to G instead. It's almost like under the skin of the chorale we have like a deceptive progression going on, because seeing 5 of E minor not go to E minor is eventually going to be a deceptive progression, but it's even further compounded by the fact that this bass continues this motive of these long 2.5 beat sustained rhythms, which in this case make the chord difficult. So I am going to put it in parentheses because the chord is clearly there, but the pedal does obfuscate the analysis. But then we get E, 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 G, and C, which, like I said, leads to our deceptive progression. That's C major over E, which is 6/6. And like I said, we are moving to G major somewhere. I feel like this is the point. C also happens to be our 4 chord. And we have a bunch of moving voices, which is a pretty clear indicator that there is a subdivision of the harmonic rhythm. All of these are non-chord tones. We have F sharp, A, D, and C. That's a D7 over F sharp, which is 5/6/5. And then we get G major, G, B, D, G, and B, which is our tonic triad in root position. And again, similar to the first phrase, we have the lower 3, the lower 3 voices. Yeah, the lower 3 voices moving. This E is a non-chord tone. This G is a chord tone, so I don't need to mark it. And this alto is also has a G. So E, G, 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 and B. It's E minor in root position, which is like a passing 6 chord, or a subdivided 6 chord. And I've consistently done that. In fact, the first phrase does that as well. It goes from 1 to 6, and then we go to 2 on this beat. Let's see if that's true. We have C, C, E, and A with a rest here, which is interesting, which is A minor over C, which now that we're in the key of G major, that is 2/6. And then we get A and G, A, C, E, G, and A. This G is like an anticipation, but also a 7th. It's like taking the chord, putting it in root position, and adding a 7th, A minor 7 in root position. I guess one of the benefits of having 5 voices is that you could get rid of one of the thirds and still double the third while still being able to add a 7th. This is not a configuration you commonly come across in the chorales with 4 voices. I guess it makes sense from that standpoint to see it when we have 5. I really hope there are more 5 voice or even more voice chorales moving forward. This is really exciting, very refreshing. But yes, on the next beat we have D, C, D, G, and A. This G presumably is a 4-3 suspension or some type of accented non-chord tone over the bass. And by the time we get the resolution, we get A, D, F sharp, and G. This G is an anticipation as well. It's a non-chord tone, but you take the aggregate of everything that's happening here. It's some type of 5-7 chord, I guess, because we have C as well. It ultimately depends. Maybe this 7 can be in parentheses, depending on how you see it. And then, of course, we cadence on G major, G, B, D, G, and G, which is our tonic triad in root position. Alright, in a fashion similar to yesterday's chorale, we are going to get another modulation to D major here, and then we're going to cadence in the key of B minor. So we get another cadence on a B major chord here, but this is a cadence in B minor where the Picardy third is used. So this is in fact a perfect authentic cadence. So we go from G major to another G major chord, G, G, D, G, and B, which is our tonic triad again, but similarly to where we modulate in the second phrase, I think this is where we modulate as well, where G becomes our 4 chord. We even have the passing 7th. We then have G, A, E, and C sharp. Again, I'm going to call that 5-4-2. If you feel like the pedal is not as important as a chord tone, you could omit it, but I'm going to leave it in there because it is in fact a chord tone. And then we get G, A, D, A, and D, but this G is a suspension. It's a 2-3 suspension like we had before. It's this F sharp, that's our chord tone, making this D major over F sharp. That's a 1-6 chord. Alright, and then we have G major, G, B, D, G, and B, which is our 4 chord again, and similarly to the second phrase, I'm trying to see as much symmetry as possible between the phrases when it's there. I am going to modulate, or I'm not the one modulating, I'm going to analyze the modulation here, but like unlike before where we're going to E minor and we're going from 4 to 3, we're seeing the other sort of stable tonic functioning chord being modulated to where G is now our 6. And this E is also a non-chord tone. This G is a chord tone though, so we get E, B, G, G, and B, which is implying E minor again. So we do get E minor happening here. In fact, we have almost an identical phrase, at least for 3 beats. The alto is doing something different, but the majority of this phrase is identical to, or the majority of this measure is identical to this measure right here. We get similar chordal structure here, but instead of modulating to E minor, we modulate to B minor. We then get C sharp, C natural. Is that right? C natural? That has to be some sort of typo. Let me go ahead and double check that real quick. We are in the 4th to last measure. The 4th to last measure. That is in fact a C sharp. Apologies, that did not make it into the edit. Yes, C sharp, A sharp, E, G, and E. The reason why I knew that was a typo, by the way, if you weren't privy to that, I'm sure the majority of you were, but if you were not privy to that, A sharp and C natural, those are a diminished third apart. It's ipso facto, that would sound like a whole step. And the only real context we're seeing whole steps in Bach's harmonic vocabulary would be like in a 7th chord where it's inverted, and we see the 2nd somewhere embedded into the chord. That or maybe an augmented 6 chord, like a French augmented 6 has that whole step in the middle of it. But other than that, I don't think we're encountering any whole steps harmonically unless they're part of a suspension. But yeah, so C natural and A sharp, that would be a very fascinating chord if that really was what was going on. But yeah, so here literally on this beat we have A sharp fully diminished 7th over C sharp, which is 7-6-5. And if you take the aggregate of everything going on here, of both beats, we also have 5 going on here: A sharp, C sharp, C sharp, F sharp, and E, which is F sharp 7. This F sharp is a non-chord tone over A, which is 5-6-5. But I wouldn't honestly blame anyone for just saying that this was all just a big 5 chord, because more or less, you could look at this G as a suspension. In fact, I think that is actually what I'm going to do. I'm going to say that this entire beat is a 5-6-5 chord, but you could make the argument that it is 7-6-5 going to 5. It's very interesting when we see dominant functioning chords like 7 going to 5. It's typically 7 going to 5, where 7 is functioning as a predominant, because if 7 is a predominant, or its role is preceding the dominant chord, really its role is unique in the sense that it is prolonging the sound of the dominant, almost like a 1-6-4 chord, where it shares that bass and we're getting that dominant pedal that eventually resolves to the tonic. I think ultimately because the two chords are happening over the same beat, really just a 5 chord is being implied, and this G does in fact look kind of like a suspension. It looks kind of like, I guess it would be like a 7-6 suspension here, but because the bass changes, I would typically expect this A sharp to sort of be the likely bass, where we'd have this diminished seventh turn into a, what would that be? To A sharp to F sharp, that would be a minor 6, so a diminished seventh to a minor 6th. But that's how I'm going to analyze it. Just know that this entire beat is just a very dominant heavy phrase, whether you decide to look at it as a subdivided chord progression of 7 going to 5, or you're sticking with one dominant chord, 7 or 5. I think the same point is being gotten across. But then we have B, F sharp, D, B, and D, which is B minor, our tonic triad. This G is a known chord tone, this B is a chord tone, this C sharp is a known chord tone. And if we take an aggregate of those, it's kind of like we have like a C sharp minor 7 flat 5 chord, but this D would need to be an E for us to analyze that. So we know the chord is kind of there, it's being implied, but we don't have the entirety of the context to analyze it. I mean, you could analyze it. The majority of the chord is there. It just depends on how liberal you want to be and how outside of the lines you want to color with your analysis. But afterwards we do get E minor. Hold on, before I speak, no, not E minor. C sharp minor 7 flat 5. This is actually where we get it. The C sharp is anticipating what's going to be the root. C sharp, E, E, G, and B, which is, like I just said, C sharp minor 7 flat 5. Bach loves 2-6-5 chords. We have a passing tone in the tenor before we get F sharp, C sharp, F sharp, A sharp, and C sharp, which is our 5 chord, F sharp major. This E is a 7th. We get a very similar thing happening. I always do this here, where we get a 5 chord and then we skip up here to the 7th, and then we enclose what's going to be the 3 of the tonic triad, which is what happens here. But instead of getting a minor tonic triad like we would expect in a phrase in minor, we get a major tonic triad, and Bach does this in yesterday's chorale as well. So when we see a cadence in the key of the minor, the dominant minor, and we see a major chord gotten or arrived to at the cadential point, typically is recontextualized as the dominant in the key of the tonic minor, which in this case is E. We've been in E or E adjacent keys for the majority of the chorale. And yeah, it's just going to naturally elide back into the key of E minor. And of course our final phrase is going to end in a perfect authentic cadence in the key of E minor. Our first chord is E minor as well, E, E, G, G, and G, which is E, E, G, B, and G, E minor in root position. This F sharp's a passing tone, this A is a passing tone, this A is a passing tone. We have E, E, F sharp, A, and A. It's kind of like a passing F sharp minor 7 flat 5, but we don't get any C to make it diminished, and that's the important contextual tone in diminished chords, is the 5. Otherwise we don't know if this is melodic minor or something else. We then have E, 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 G, and B, which is another tonic triad. We don't need to analyze it again. Passing 7th in the alto before we get E, F sharp, C, F sharp, and A. This E is most likely a lower suspension, some type of like 4-5 or like 9-10 suspension, I guess, depending on what voice you're combining. It's being suspended under multiple voices. So here's D sharp, F sharp, C, F sharp, and A, which is again like we saw in our first measure, D sharp fully diminished 7th in root position. Notice how even with 5 voices, Bach does not double the leading tone. We saw a doubled leading tone in a recent video. I can't remember if it was yesterday's episode or an episode not too far back, but we saw a single instance of a doubled leading tone, but it wasn't in a diminished triad. It was in a 5 chord, but still the leading tone doubled was very interesting. We then have E, G, B, E, and G, which is our tonic triad, E minor. The C is a non-chord tone. This F sharp's a non-chord tone. That leaves us with C, E, 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 and F sharp. Not really an analyzable chord. Actually, we could make the argument that this is kind of like a passing 2 chord in the same way that this is like a passing 2 chord, but we don't have a non-chord tone being suspended over this chord. All of these tones are chord tones, we just don't have the third of the chord. And for diminished triads, that's fine, but ultimately I feel like what's happening here is that we have like some loose arpeggiation of what's being arrived to. We're arpeggiating an A minor chord, which is the upper, I'm not sure I'm using that term correctly, upper structure of the F sharp minor 7 flat 5 chord, because we have A, C, E, and F sharp, which is 2, 6, 5. Bach loves 2, 6, 5 chords. The same way that he is preceding the 2, 6, 5 chord with ingredients from the 2, 6, 5 chord, he even arpeggiates the upper 3 pitches of the chord in the bass. There's definitely symmetry going on, and it's firing off on all cylinders here. But yeah, we eventually arrive at a proper 2, 6, 5 chord, or just a proper 2, 7 chord in general, rather than preceding it with, he precedes it with not the entirety of the context, and he cranks the zoom, or not the zoom, sorry, I'm not a camera aficionado, the focus on the camera, and then brings the chord in a complete focus here, which is very interesting. We then have a passing tone in the tenor here, B, F sharp, B, D sharp, and F sharp. That is our 5 chord, and again he uses this sort of enclosure here where he surrounds what's going to be on the other side. In this case he also does it with the 7th like he did here. I feel like he also did it elsewhere. He did it at the end of the first phrase as well. And of course we cadence on 1, E, G sharp, B, E, and E, which is our tonic triad in major. Bach often ends his minor chorales with a major tonic. I imagine it's because he wants to end on a more uplifting mood, especially because a lot of these settings can be relatively dreary. This one's not super dreary, but you know, when minor is the general tonality, ending on major is a good thing. However, this is actually not the last movement, so I think maybe there's something more to it than that. Maybe my speculation isn't entirely correct. But that's going to wrap up the analysis for today. All things considered, the chorale is very similar to yesterday's chorale, just having to break down 5 voices instead of 4 voices made this video inherently longer than it usually is, because I'm analyzing, what would it be, 20% more? Am I doing my numbers right there? I think so, 20% more. Just having to speak more means that there's going to be more content in the video. But yeah, really not too much to say here. Everything's more or less functional. I'd say the biggest point of contention here would be, if it's not this 5, 6, 5 versus 7 chord here, probably just the points in which I chose to modulate to and from G major, or not G major, sorry, D major. Again, sometimes modulations present themselves in kind of a zone, so if you identify the fact that there is a chord change or a key change happening, that's what matters. What doesn't matter is if it's happening exactly at the point. You know, sometimes I think the modulation analysis can be wrong. Sometimes it's too late or too early and it's just not super practical, but when you're within the zone, when you're within that sweet spot, that's what matters the most. Before we wrap up the video, I wanted to thank everyone who has been following me along on this journey thus far. I logged onto YouTube and saw that I had 100 subscribers. Thank you so much for 100 subscribers. It means the world to me. I didn't start the channel to grow a community or anything, but it's really awesome that people have been following me along on the journey. The engagement with the videos has been awesome. I know that I post a video every day, so naturally the way that things work is if I have more videos out there, I'm going to get more views. That's just how it is. But just know that I do see my videos being engaged with more frequently, and people are watching my videos as they're getting uploaded, which is really exciting. So thank you so much for supporting me on this journey. I really hope I am delivering with the content. I'm trying to stay as consistent as I can, And here's to more subscribers and finding more people who are enthusiastic about Bach and are excited about the journey. But on that note, thank you so much for watching the video and supporting the channel by doing so. I look forward to tomorrow's analysis, and I hope you take care.